All right, so now we're ready to start council time, my error earlier, and not. I know that we wish to amend the agenda. Do you wish to do that at this time, Kathleen?
Yes, please. So I would request that we remove new business 3.1, body camera. I saw I had a typo in my email. It says body worn cameras, but it's body worn cameras. The Sheriff's Office just isn't quite ready. They are still moving ahead and making good progress, but they'll join us in a couple of weeks. The second one is removing new business 3.2, neighborhood association update. The presentation wasn't done yet, and we want to make sure that we can get those posted timely for the council and the community to see beforehand. And then adding one new business regarding council meetings.
Any objection to amending the agenda? All good reasons, and I just want to assure the public, the body cams particularly is all going well, and we expect a very positive report from the Sheriff's Department. Okay, so we'll go ahead and amend the agenda in that way. And back to public comment. We're hopeful to have positive public comment on agenda items only. Please.
Good morning. Push. Good morning, councilors. My name is John Spencer. I'm here acting as owner of Get Together Farm and speaking to you on, I believe it's 2.2 of Old Business Wineries and Rural Event Centers. My farm is actually on Ag 20, so I could be doing a conditional use permit for events. I am only planting about 5 acres of it. It's a small, diverse farm, diverse orchard, pumpkin patch, diverse vegetable field. Too small to compete on a wholesale market, so I need to do direct sales to make a living. And even there, I think pretty much every small farmer will agree that it's pretty darn hard to make ends meet. The vast majority are forced to hold second jobs or primary jobs in order to keep their farms going. In my case, I'm trying to do it as a full-time farmer, minus public duties, and a big part of my business plan is agritourism. That's how I get people up to the farm to shop my produce. I already do a fair amount of business with the pumpkin patch, as do other farms that have pumpkin patches that are actually attracting a heck of a lot more people than your average wedding. I just want to urge you to move forward on enabling small farms to be able to hold events and weddings. I am very happy to help in any way I can, sit on a committee, provide any resources I have for you. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
We have one individual online.
Okay.
Caller, please go ahead with your comments.
Yes, good morning. This is Kimberly Goheen Elbin, life citizen of Clark County. So the population growth, I want to talk about that, and then I'll be speaking about the community in action also.
So I don't see that on our agenda this morning, ma'am. Do you have something that addresses our agenda items?
Action on your agenda? Is it community action on your agenda? Yes, it is, sir. The community action. Thank you very much for interrupting me. Hope I get another minute. Impact fees, on that, it says impact fees help local governments seeking voted top increases. Well, it's helping the local government. It says so right there in the paperwork that this is for the government, not for the people. It really isn't. We want fire, we want police, and we want EMTs. Okay, so remember that it's on record that this, for this year that Mr. Medved doesn't want the public to participate. He really doesn't. You need to listen to this. I've mentioned that on past records, that they need to listen what they had a little powwow about. This impact fee also must be.
I'm missing the agenda item that you're speaking to. Do you have a specific agenda item that you would like to provide public comment on?
It's all about this, sir. Okay, it's about the community action. So in my opinion, when our corrupt, treasonous U.S. government headed by criminal Biden and Inslee for Washington State, they will call for another emergency, as was the Wuhan release of a man-made virus made for the pandemic that the United Nations Agenda 21-2030 warns us about. I do ask readers, because of this agenda.
Yeah, thank you. We've heard about the UN. We don't participate in the UN agenda. Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other callers online?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. So going to the old business minutes, any corrections or comments?
I would move to approve the minutes of May 3rd.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we've had it moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, so wineries and rural centers 2.2.
So April Firth, our Community Development Director, will be providing the overview, and I know she's got Max Booth online and others.
Good morning. April Firth, Community Development Director. I am here to discuss wineries versus real event centers. A previous director has done most of the research to the information that I'm providing today. And at the end, we will talk about whether you want me to continue the research and how you want me to move forward. So the background so far, or I'm going to be providing the background. We can go to the next slide. Community concerns that were gathered by the previous Director of Community Development, options, and next steps. And we can go to the next slide. So currently in Clark County, event businesses are only permitted as an accessory to wineries in rural areas where wineries are permitted. So all of the Rs, R5, R10, R20, wineries are permissible, but not rural event centers. They are only permitted as an event center is only permitted as an accessory to a winery in those zones. Currently, rural event centers are allowed in half of the ag, so ag 20, and then the forestry with a CUP. Property owners have expressed interest in code revisions that would allow rural commercial event businesses not related to wineries as permitted property use, primarily agritourism, so farms. On July 31st and October 9th of 2019, community forums were convened to gather feedback, opinions, and recommendations regarding non-winery rural event venues for Clark County residents, rural and farm enterprise operation, and property owners. Next slide. I think I already went over this, but current event facilities less than 5,000 square feet may be approved with a conditional use permit in the FR40 and the Ag 20 zones. Event centers without a winery are not permissible in R20, R10, or R5 zoning. And then I've provided on the next 2 pages the winery code. The winery code, of course, I wasn't here when it was adopted, but the purpose of this section is clear. It is to encourage the development of wineries in the county while mitigating impacts of neighboring parcels. And those impacts are things that we do need to consider with our next steps. If we want to move through those, yep. In the public forums, the pros that came out of those discussions are the ability to hold wedding events without requiring a winery, but with other farming activities. Non-winery events could be allowed in those R10, R5, R20 zones with conditional use permits. That's what the proposal is. Permitting non-winery rural event centers could legitimize existing unpermitted venues. And then other, not just weddings, but farm-to-table events and educational events would be expanded. In those forums, cons, allowing commercial events in residential zones would conflict with those wanting peaceful enjoyment of their land, so neighbors. Amplified sound and loud music at events. Light nuisance in rural Clark County. Increased traffic on rural roads, and then the impact to the current wineries, the event centers, it would increase their competition. So while there was support for allowing event venues in rural Clark County as permitted uses without requiring operation of a winery, doing so would require substantial and costly compliance resources and general fund support to ensure the rural character is not further compromised and to address existing nuisance violations. So currently, rural home occupation and agricultural districts regulations do allow the permitting of a wide array of commercial services and businesses that do not require the operation of a winery. So bed and breakfasts, commercial nurseries, locally produced plants, farm stands, agritourism activities promoting the sale of farm crops, provided they are supplemental to and compatible with conditional use of the property, roadside farm stands and markets, commercial kennels, public interpretive educational uses, and private recreation facilities, including retreats, but excluding such intensive uses as Clark County clubs and golf courses. So again, in 2019, the community recommendations, rural business opportunities should be expanded, but with responsive and timely enforcement support, especially on weekends and evenings. And that's an increase to probably what would be needed from the sheriff's office. Rural event venues and businesses without wineries should require a Type 2A or Type 3 land use process for conditional use permits. From what I can see of the research, that is so that neighbors and anyone on these roads would have a voice at the public hearing, because a 2A can be requested as a public hearing, and a Type 3 is always a public hearing with the land use, with the hearings examiner. Rural event venues should not be permitted in private communities with HOAs. Traffic, light, and noise mitigation must be required, maintained, and monitored for effectiveness by applicants. Another reason to request a CUP, where we can go over what is needed in each particular case. That's why you'd want a CUP. Venue size should be tied to the size of the lot, proximity to other residents, road size and surface, and then special events as currently permitted by the Fire Marshal's Office should be available for one-time non-commercial events, which is in place now. So just some things to consider. All buildings associated with rural event centers, including ag structures, unpermitted structures on properties, will need to be permitted for commercial use. So I think this is, when contemplating, this is maybe something that farms are not considering, that could be costly, because they have ag structures that cannot have the public in them safely. If it is decided that rural event centers should be allowed and follow a Type 2A or Type 3, should we then require that for all wineries for consistency in similar uses? Fire safety in the WUI and fire flow in rural zones could be an area, or could be an issue for these rural zones. Critical areas in rural zones where they are allowed to do farming activity, these things would come into play for running a rural event center. traffic impacts on rural roads, and enforcement, both code enforcement and the sheriff, buildings, noise, and traffic. So next steps would be that you decide that no code amendments are necessary at this time. There are ample opportunities and pathways to permit commercial venues in rural Clark County. Or we could draft a recommendation for code and policy changes to allow rural event centers with CUPs and expand rural home occupation standards. I could do more public outreach if I was directed to do so. Circulate draft recommendations to stakeholders for review and confirmation. Present draft code and policy changes to Clark County Board of Counselors. I have received public comments, so there are differences of opinions. We could do the type 2A or type 3, which I think would give neighbors more of a voice, but there is another part where we could just expand the winery code and draft that into allowing farms and just expand that out. So there are two options. They don't have to do the CUP, but the winery code is pretty lenient. And so expanding that right away, it could be bigger than we know. And then if whichever way you direct me to go, we go through the type 4 public hearing and adoption process if you do want me to start doing research and drafting code. And that is the end of my presentation.
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you very much, April, for your work on this. I guess as I've been thinking about this, and I've sent the information out to a few folks, the Farm Bureau and other folks that have been interested in this, it seems like there's various ways that we could go, just to expand the winery. It could be its whole own category. One thing I was wondering is, have there been problems related to the wineries and how that's been going with their events?
There are code enforcement cases with wineries.
Okay.
With unpermitted wineries or unpermitted activities on wineries.
Okay, great. So there inevitably would be some issues, whatever path we decide to take. One thing that I would note in talking to some of the wineries, I know they were supportive of this, the ones that I spoke with, because they were concerned about people planting grapes and not really upholding a high standard for the wine that they were producing, and that local wineries are interested in pursuing the American viticulture area, which, you know, in those communities that have that designation, the value of what they produce really goes way up, impacts the whole community economically in a good way. And so their concern was, rather than have people get into wine without really having that level of commitment, they thought it was better just to allow small farms to be able to do that. And the other thing that I think is really important, because a lot of the farms are small, there's a few larger farms, and we've got to hang on to those farms really with both hands. But the economic strategy that the Extension Service is pursuing and a lot of farmers are pursuing is really the value added, is the way to make their farms economically viable, and the agritourism is the way to go. So I would be enthusiastically supportive of this, and just based on some of the communications I've had with the different interests, I've thought that it'd be good just to pull a few of these folks together and, you know, and with you, and just kind of sort through how this could work, so that those, you know, the people that would be operating these businesses would be more or less agreeable, and then take it out to the community and shop it around and adjust as needed. But I think it's worthwhile to pursue this for rural economic vitality and supporting those businesses and emerging businesses. So thank you for that.
Thank you for putting a wonderful quote in there from Yoda.
It was Star Wars Day when I did it.
I got a laugh out of that. I was curious, we didn't really get anything in terms of public outreach. How extensive was that in the past, and do we have that information accumulated that we could get that?
The previous director does, for sure, and the outreach was pretty extensive, but I've even just public noticing this presentation, I received a significant amount of public outreach, all supportive at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The only thing that I have personally received is supportive, but it's also one of those things where, you know, people don't realize that they need to comment on it because they can't see how it impacts them or could impact them. Is it being suggested in here at all to allow in residentially zoned parcels?
Single family,
Okay.
not outside of R10, R5, and R20.
Okay, is there a way, because I see the value in this, definitely. I see that there's also impacts that we're going to have to contend with. But is there a way to restrict it to a parcel that actually is being used for farming purposes?
We could probably figure out a way. You could do a minimum size because, you know, there are acreage or acre parcels within smaller zoning requirements. You know, they'll have a 5-acre parcel in a R1.
Okay.
So you could make a minimum parcel size.
Okay, and I mean, again, to me, it's like trying to give farms another tool, another economic tool, but I don't want to give that tool to everybody necessarily. I don't really, to be honest with you, I'm not sure on that yet, but I'm still exploring that. One of the things that I think about is the comment on compliance and enforcement, I think, is definitely going to be an issue. I think right now it's pretty simple when you see one of these events happening. It's at a winery. I mean, likely there's not a problem that it's legitimately done, but as we open it up to other places, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for people to discern whether that's a legal event or not that's taking place. And there certainly will be expense involved in enforcement on that. And one of the things that I did speak with somebody that does own a winery, and I think generally it was supportive, but there was something that was brought up that I think is important to think about, and that was that their winery has a liquor license, and they have that license, and they need to protect it. So they are much more likely to make sure that all the rules are followed, that people aren't getting overly intoxicated, and that people aren't leaving intoxicated and driving. So I don't know how we would replace that in this instance, because I don't know that they would have to have a liquor license.
I believe they would have to get a liquor license, even if it was a special event liquor license, or generally if it's, from my experience, if it's catered, it would be catered by someone who carries the liquor license.
Okay.
I envision most of them getting a liquor license.
Okay. And then I was curious, if we did move forward with this, is there a potential cost recovery method for the conditional use permit process and time that staff spends working on those?
It's one of the reasons why the CUP is attractive, at first at least, because it will be new and it will require more staff time to look at it and have a public hearing and hear neighbors. Another reason why the CUP route looks attractive is that, like you said, some residents don't know that they need to say something until they have one going in next door.
Okay, and so I'm really big on cost recovery. If, you know, on the front end, obviously we have the staff time. On the back end, we have enforcement, and I don't know if it's possible to build that in there. I don't want to create a process that's
overly expensive, but also at the same time, it's creating a, you know, a larger burden on county resources. So I kind of feel like I'm not sure which way to give you direction, to be honest with you. I wasn't involved in the conversation before. I'm definitely supportive of looking at moving forward in some capacity, but I'm not sure if I can answer your initial questions on which way to move forward on it. Thank you.
And a CUP would give, a CUP is more expensive for the property owner, but it has more cost recovery involved in it.
Thank you.
Michelle, did you have some comments, questions?
Thank you for all the work that you did to put this together, April. I think it sounds like a great idea, all the positive feedback that we received. It's been interesting to learn about this process and how these things work. So that's all I have.
So, and I don't think the chair has been able to join us yet, so it's just us four. I'm hoping that we can continue on. This was a process that kind of just evaporated, and mainly because there's at least represented to us from these open houses and comments that I think you may have missed or didn't know about. So I don't know how they were publicized, but essentially the feedback we got was, well, 50% want it, 50% don't. And by the way, there's other ways for these potential events to occur without doing any changes in code. And it kind of just dropped by the wayside. So here are my thoughts. One, I support moving forward. And I would like, there's going to be a lot of work no matter how narrow we define this. I mean, so as soon as it was always, I thought, inequitable for wineries to have kind of the code. I don't know, you know, if they had such a strong winery lobby way back when, you know, and then we had a permitting department solving this situation by, you know, for our those growing flowers out in the community, just plant some grapes and call yourself a winery, or, you know, other mechanisms to just call yourself a winery. It's inequitable that all these other small farms have to jump through different hoops in order to take advantage and have these events. And there's a wide array of events that can occur, and we've talked about it in different venues. I mean, there's still a marijuana recreational tourism industry out there, and boy, do we want to have those rock concerts and loud music in the local Airbnb somewhere out in the rural community where everyone moved to the rural community to have peace and quiet and dark skies. So there's a lot of challenges here with code enforcement too, and besides the staff time to even figure this out. And as soon as if we focus just on small farms, then of course everyone's going to want to be called a small farm. So how do we define the small farm? From my point of view, it was kind of like the old real estate mantra: location, location, location. It depends on where this is. You know, what negative impacts may overcome the road, from dust to noise, you name it. And then we talk about, well, what size parcel? I mean, I know there are several small farms that are smaller than 5 acres that are operating small businesses, farm fresh, eggs, vegetables, flowers, plants from raspberries and other bushes that they sell, and it's on less than 5 acres, and that's how they're operating. And so there's a lot of devil in the details here. So the first thing I would say is I support it. I really want to go forward. I want to narrow what we're looking at, which means small farms, you know, because there's a lot of businesses out there, and I don't have a good handle of this, and I know I sent you kind of a snarky email about some of the code enforcement cases that involve other businesses in rural areas that, you know, I don't even know the wide array of businesses, permitted or unpermitted, that are allowed uses, depending on, even Rural 5 has some business uses. So right now, I want to focus on small farms. How do we define it? Is it just within the urban growth area? Is it without the urban growth area? Is it for all of unincorporated Clark County? I support all of unincorporated Clark County. I think there, and I want to make it scalable, especially within the open urban growth area, to kind of preserve and enhance small farms. So I wouldn't want to tie it necessarily to a specific acreage or zone. It depends on the roads. It depends on what's nearby. And that's where the devil in the details gets really challenging. What will work? That'll, you know, I wish we had a complete and total culture, knowing people differently, but code enforcement's got the big challenge of the culture is, let's comply with our code. Let's get permits that are required. And let's be respectful of our neighbors across the board. And I will tell you, just with wineries, because, and I was going to ask this, make the same point I think Sue was making, you know, some of the negatives that you had on the slides apply to wineries right now. I mean, it's kind of just a code enforcement challenge, regardless of what the property is, whether it's an Airbnb, a winery, or a small, beautiful farm like John Spencer's. You know, so, you know, that's where the challenges come. So I would like to move forward. I'm wondering if we do have ideas of, is it the entire incorporated area? Do you want to focus? You know, we eliminated ag exempt essentially from within the urban growth area because of the problems it caused for non-ag use. And the point's well made that, okay, if you're going to have public, whether it's a wedding, large or small, all scalable, you have ag exempt structures built out there without any permit, fire protection, you name it out there, and all of this is going to be time consuming and staff consuming to make sure we have safe venues for the public. So, I mean, is there a sense for that? Do you want to go for the whole incorporated area? Do you want to focus just on small farms, which I recommend, and or some variation of that? I mean, what are the council's feelings? I mean, I've heard general consensus that we want to move forward. And again, we had some open houses, but I think it even missed most of the small farm community. We do need to open this up. I do support getting kind of a council of experts, a committee of small farmers to get together to give us their ideas and input to how we can make this work for everyone, including your neighbors that may not be very supportive. Thoughts?
Well, I think focusing on small farms is a good place to focus, and I haven't thought about inside the urban area or outside. I was thinking mostly in the rural area because that's where I'm at, and I think definitely there needs to be side boards because there's not every farm that wants to have events. And, you know, just looking at this, there could be half a dozen just surrounding my farm. So there definitely needs to be sideboards put on this. And I'd be happy to work with you to identify some people to pull them together to help, you know, figure out what that frame is. And I think that this isn't going to be necessarily easy for a farm to move forward with this, especially if it involves bringing a barn or something like that up the code. That'd be prohibitive for most barns that I'm aware of. But, you know, there can be absolutely all outside, you know, canopies, things like that. There's ways to get around this, but it's not going to be necessarily easy for an individual to move forward with this, given whatever is developed as far as sideboards, but I do think it's an equity question and a fairness, and I think for the future of agriculture in Clark County, developing avenues for value-added agritourism kinds of things are very important.
You make a good point, which is one of the things, I mean, this is all I've been thinking about for weeks now. What if you lived on a street with 3 farms and all of them want to do weddings? You know, like you have to think about those things. Yes, and when the research was done, the previous director does say, he has documentation that says at the time it was 50-50. It was 50% wanted to go forward and 50% of public and council, I think, at the time. And that is why the decision was made to pause. And it was October of 2019. So not too long later, you have the start of the pandemic.
Let me clarify, though, that it never came back to the council to vote to go forward or pause. It just kind of, because of the pandemic, just went away. Further comments, I did want to just emphasize another thing. Besides focusing on small farms, what business activities, and I think that would probably come from the committee, be informed by a small farm committee. You don't want to just say, well, we're only talking about weddings.
And the state has some parameters, again, around agritourism that we could use as a reference.
Further comment?
Yeah, a couple of comments. So one, I would definitely be supportive of forming an advisory group like that because I think they would be much more capable of making those decisions. I would encourage, however, that we include somebody that would represent neighborhoods as well so that we have that voice so we don't miss part of the conversation. I would also be curious to find out if there is a difference in support between areas that are inside the UGA and outside. I would imagine there probably is a difference, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out. And then I'm wondering, is there, I don't know if you've even thought about it, so I would just make the suggestion that we look into finding ways that if a building, an unpermitted or an exempt building, is not being used, some sort of a method for preventing people from accessing the site and allowing it to move forward still. Just something I think we should look into because, I mean, that can mean the difference completely between being able to do this or not, you know, based on that. So those are my thoughts, and I'm supportive of moving forward and looking into this and hearing what people have to say about it.
Yeah, I really, I agree with everyone's sentiments. I think getting a small group together of farmers to discuss this and get their thoughts would be a really good idea, especially since in the last couple of months, people have complained about different things that the county was going to do without input, or folks that just didn't notice that we had put out announcements for different projects. I think this would be a really good thing to do, to partner with our small farmers and get their thoughts before we move forward in doing this.
So great. It sounds like we have unanimity in moving forward. Did you have any points of clarification for us today?
I don't think so.
Super. Any last comments? Thank you, April. And so we'll go on to 2.4.
Which is also April. So this is, we've noticed it in 2 different ways. That a constituent came forward regarding the light in the rural area. So this is in response to that, to look at, you know, what options are, and I don't know if we received the written feedback from Deeb. Okay, we have, because council did ask April to take that back to Deeb to get their feedback, and so they have provided feedback in writing that she can share with council.
I'm trying to get back in so I'm not quoting them incorrectly. But when I did bring it to Deeb, they thought that it did not belong in building code, that it was more of an ordinance or in a nuisance code. That was their recommendation. And if code was written, they would be willing to look at it and review it.
Comments, questions? But the comment I would make is, one, I mean, I'm a backpacker. I go and look for dark skies, and I was just in the Phoenix area a couple months ago out in the desert camping, and all I could see was the glow from Phoenix. I mean, it was otherwise an area would have been beautiful to look up at the stars. And, you know, and there was a recent article that was just shared with all of us, but I had already read it. You know, it impacts wildlife tremendously, especially birds. And there's some thoughtless stuff that goes on as far as blaring light into your neighbor's house. I'm all about safety. I have some lights around my house for my own safety, but I try to go easy on it. LEDs are particularly a problem. Quite frankly, I'm in favor of moving forward, and I think it belongs in our code because, I mean, that's where it starts, is with new developments, and everyone should be thoughtful about light pollution as it impacts our general environment. And so despite Deeb's input, I may disagree respectfully with where it may reside, because I think first and foremost, we want all of our developments to be mindful of these issues. Anyway, those are just my thoughts.
In April, could you clarify, looking at other codes that other cities or counties have had, is it in their code and development code?
It's in their development code, their land use codes.
I have a couple comments. I hate to put more work on you, April, and thank you for thinking about the rural businesses for all these weeks. But related to the light pollution, and I attended the Deeb meeting where they discussed this, and I think, you know, I was initially came forward as one individual who had a neighbor's light shining, you know, in the evening into their living room. It was an immediate nuisance. But I think from my perspective, and maybe Deeb didn't really look at it this way, but you know, looking at it in a broader perspective as light pollution is how I'm looking at it, and that it really does have an impact. It has an impact on humans and wildlife, and yet I just look at Clark County and the resources we have here, Steigerwald Wildlife Refuge, Ridgefield Wildlife Refuge. These are, you know, incredible resources. We're part of the Pacific Flyway. The disorientation of light in the evening has a real impact, and that, you know, this article that was in the paper a few weeks ago, the estimate is that 9.6% brighter the skies are getting every year, and it will eventually, that glow will obliterate the evening stars. And I know just for my own experience with my son, was enamored with space and the planets, and went on to get a master's in biology and teaches, you know, he's teaching science teachers how to teach science. So I think it's just really important. And I think also that it needs to be in the code. I think for the trade-offs, you know, and this is looking out really a longer term of what's happening in Clark County, and what we may want to protect. And if it's just a matter of switching out the outdoor lighting on new development, you know, unless it's wildly expensive, I think it's worthy of taking a look at how we can just replace that. And as for enforcement, I think enforcement, you know, can be an issue across the board with everything, every code that exists. And I think for the most part, people, you know, if they come in for a permit and they say, oh, well, these are the kinds of lights that you're allowed to use, they'll, you know, maybe pick the cheapest one, but that will still accomplish the purpose that for the most part, people want to be agreeable and compliant. So I would like to find a way forward with this. And I think this is another example where the larger community, I'm thinking of Audubon and other wildlife organizations, the Friends of the Refuge, things like that. They haven't really, I think, noticed this and would be very interested in provide some valuable input early on when we're just kind of thrashing around with this idea. So I'd support moving forward.
Yes, I also would support moving forward. However, I would say I want to keep this, I would prefer to keep it simple. To me, the primary problem is direct light escaping from one parcel to the other. So not indirect. I mean, stuff can reflect off and go out, that's okay. But if you can look out from any place on your property and see the bulb itself, then that to me is a problem. I don't know how to word that, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. I want to be careful not to have unintended consequences with this and prevent people from, you know, farmers from running their tractors after dark and things like that, you know. So I do want to keep it simple and just kind of have something in the code to where if somebody really has an issue, they have a method for getting something solved. That's the way I look at it. Thank you.
I agree with moving forward as well.
Thanks for mentioning the tractor. Actually, that does happen, so.
Any further guidance that you need, April? Any further comments? Super, thank you. Let's go on to 3.3, request for proclamation.
We actually have 2.5 counselor vacancy discussion for today. It is on for a hearing next Tuesday, and that's okay. And Leslie can go over the changes that were captured after last discussion.
Thank you. I skipped that one. I think I'm suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder after the last session on it. Anyway, go ahead, Leslie.
Good morning, Council. Pursuant to the Council's request, I did make some changes based on last week's discussion, so it is brought up here today. And it's in the ordinance format, so it does look a little different. It's the same language, but it's formatted differently. This is placing a new chapter under 2.04A, entitling it the Counselor Vacancy Policy. So part of the changes we discussed last week is on this first page, which talks about the counselor vacancies in the appointment process. I deleted the sentence that stated that the counselor vacating their position cannot participate in the appointment process, because as we'll discuss later, there are areas where that vacating counselor is able to participate. So that sentence has been deleted. If we could go to the next page, please. This section talks about the counselor vacancy interviews, and so I have added some language here in this first paragraph, stating that the council will review the applicant's materials for the purpose of selecting no more than 5 applicants to interview. And then I added language that is very similar to when the interviews take place. When the voting takes place, that upon completion of the applicant's materials review, the council may convene an executive session to discuss the qualifications, and that the selection of candidates for interview will be conducted in an open public meeting. And it's at that point that the vacating counselor can participate in the review of applicants' materials and selection of candidates for interview if that vacating counselor is still in office. The only other thing I added was subsection A asks for, during the public meeting, asks for a motion to select candidates, and I just included and a second from the council, just to make that clear. Any questions yet?
Well, I was just going to say that I looked through it and everything looks great. So I think that the changes really reflected what our discussion was.
So the only question I had, and I share those thoughts, and maybe I heard this wrong, when we were talking about the number that we were going to have, I had kind of advocated, well, let's have a flexible number. It just depends on the resumes you get, whether you want to keep 3 or 4 or 5. I thought the discussion kind of turned on, well, let's just have it 3 or not specify a number, but my recollection's vague on that. What do the other counselors remember? Because I see that in paragraph 1 under 2.04 alpha.
I believe I received some comments from the public saying just keep it open, but I think no more than 5 means that it could be 3, or another way to word it would be at least 3 to 5. I think 5, no more than 5 seems a reasonable number.
Okay, and I see some positive head nods, so I stand corrected. We'll leave it at no more than 5. Looks good to me. Any other questions or comments or other comments you wanted to make?
That sounds great. I just wanted to point out the last change,
Please.
on the next page. And thank you for your comments. This added the paragraph 1 that basically states that the interviews, nominations, and votes to select can't occur until the position is vacant, and the vacating counselor can't participate in that process. So just wanted to point that out for the public as well if they're watching or listening. So we will have this ready to go for next Tuesday's council meeting for review and consideration.
Okay, thank you for your persistence and additional work on this issue, and hopefully we won't have to use it, but we may. You never know.
And just as a reminder, next week is also rules of procedure, so both of those will be in a hearing next Tuesday night.
Super. All right, so on to new business. We've already removed several, so we're on 3.3, request for proclamation.
This is the first one is an annual one that comes back before council from Community Services, and it's identifying Community Action Month in May of 2023. If this is supported by the council, we will have this on next Tuesday's agenda as well.
I would support this.
And I see Glenn shaking his head yes. And how about you,
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, super.
Yep.
I as well. 3.4.
Yes, so this is also a proclamation for Clark County Peace Officers Memorial Day. This actually was brought forward and drafted by Councilor Belcott as well as Sheriff's Office employees. So Councilor Belcott, I don't know if you want to provide any information on the draft in front.
Yeah, so this hasn't been done since 2019. So I think it's really important that Deputy Jeremy Brown was mentioned, as he was added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. last year, which a lot of the deputies, to include our sheriff, will be headed to D.C. This coming weekend in observance of that, which is on the 15th of May. I also thought it was very important that we also mentioned Deputy Drew Kensington due to his amputation of his leg and losing his leg while he was on duty. So I tried to include the most significant things related to law enforcement for our county.
And I certainly strongly endorse that as well. And it was in the sheriff's newsletter as well. There's, litigation going on surrounding that tragic event as well. My first year on the council, I was asked to speak at this event, and I was unable to because I was already speaking at Fort Vancouver for Memorial Day on behalf of, as a retired officer. And so I'm hopeful that we not only do the proclamation, but we have one or more counselors available to actually be there for the event. So it sounds like we have unanimity on this one as well. Kind of related, and I just wanted to ask the manager about this. You know, we had a proclamation for correctional officers, and it was read to a small entourage. And I'm just wondering, though, I know it'll be somewhat untimely since it's just a week, but I think it is deserving of being read at a public meeting. So I gave it back to Kristen, and I was hopeful that we could get it scheduled to be read at the next Tuesday.
Yes, we can certainly do that. Unfortunately, we got it too late, but so, because it's a week that they're recognizing, but, you know, I don't think there's any issue, and I think it would be nice to do it even after the fact.
Super. Yeah, I think it's important to morale and recruitment and a lot of other issues that it get more
and I have
wide
heard,
dissemination.
and I have heard from some of the staff over in corrections, and they were very appreciative for those who came yesterday and shared your support and just gathered with them. So thank you, Council.
Okay.
Yeah, Councilor
Councilor,
McGucci,
yes, please.
I was planning on presenting this during the fundraiser that's going to be at the Taps Brewing Restaurant on the 20th of May. I got the okay from the Sheriff's Guild. They're thrilled about that. So I okayed it with Madam Chair, and she said it was okay if they were okay. So that was my plan, because they're all going to be leaving out of town for DC this weekend. So the majority of them won't be around to get it at our next council meeting. So that was the plan.
Oh, super. And now I do see that our chair is with us. We were just about to get to councilor reports. Madam Chair, take it away. Oh, wait.
Yeah, we have one more new business item on councilor meetings. And so I want to make sure that everybody is ready to move on to that agenda item. It's one we added at the beginning of the meeting.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Apologize, I had one comment real quick about the proclamation.
Please.
First of all, love it, support it. Question, do we have something similar for fire? If we could look into that, because I don't know if they have a national week or something like that. I would want to make sure we don't miss something like that. But then also, on the document itself, it looks like there's an extra line between Sue Marshall. She's being kind of stuck down there at the bottom a little. That's it. Thank you.
I just have a comment. I want to thank you, Councillor Belcott, for working on this, and I'm supportive.
So, Madam Chair, are you on board? Can you hear us?
I certainly am, and I think that takes care of the agenda item that you were addressing, Kathleen, right?
The proclamation one, and then we have one more new business agenda item for councilor meetings.
Okay, let's talk about that. I think that is an important one, actually.
Yes. So as you know, our council meetings have been going a little longer than they have historically. And I do think that this is a combination of COVID slowed things down because we were restricted on what we could do in the first couple of years. So we're getting back up to speed, and then, you know, we're just full speed ahead with all of our work. And now we have the comp plan update that's also going to be taking some time. I did learn that historically, council did meet weekly. I did not realize that. So as just a starting point for discussion today, I would ask for your discussion and consideration of adding another Tuesday meeting. So currently, the first Tuesday, the council meets during the day. The third Tuesday is at night. And so I would propose adding the fourth Tuesday during the day, and then do a placeholder on the second Tuesday in the event that we need to continue something to a date certain and can't wait for the 2 weeks. And this hopefully will help spread out the work and then have us some flexibility to address things more timely. So, And I also would like to put this back on the agenda next week, just to solidify that, since it was added today, to allow for public comment as well.
And probably council comments as well, because that is something of concern to all of us as well.
Yes, and I wanted to add on this piece, also scheduling a break time during the meetings, so that the public and people who are participating in person or online and the council knows when we'll have a break, and the break during the day would be at 11:50 a.m. And I think we can, adjust that in the event that we're in the middle of a presentation or good dialogue that you don't want to take, but that's the targeted time for 10 minutes, and then a break at night at 7:50.
Chair?
Yes, Counselor?
Sure, just a couple comments on this. Nobody likes to have an extra day, but the work of the county needs to be done. So I'm supportive of whatever we need to do to get that work done. Couple things about like the break. I would like us to at least consider kind of separating portions of the meeting. When we get a really stacked meeting, even though it's difficult, I would like to schedule a time, or at least look into scheduling a time saying that this one is planned to start at 9 a.m., this one's planned to start at 10, maybe just two, not each particular hearing. But what that does is it gives individuals the ability to say, look, I'm not, I'm here to listen to and testify for this particular thing. Now I know I don't have to be here at 9, at least I can come in at 10, and I'm not having to wait through the whole entire thing to make sure that I'm able to be heard. So I think that would be something that we should consider.
Thank you for that. And I wonder if you could kind of solidify just a bit your exact desire for the change that you're proposing. I think that maybe some of us read into it our own thoughts.
Sure. So I would say, let's say if we have 4 public hearings scheduled, and I'm just going to pick a time because it doesn't make any sense, but let's just say they started at 9 a.m. And we could do our best to assume that maybe 2 of those would take an hour or an hour and a half. So we would schedule the meeting to start at 9, and then we would have on our agenda that at 10:30, the next 2 would start. Now, the downside of that is if we end up going a lot quicker than anticipated on those first 2, we end up with a pause where we can't start until the notified beginning of the next meeting. But it does allow the citizens that opportunity to only attend what they need to so that they can get on with their lives.
Yes, that is a bit of a disadvantage in that it will make it to where the people who want to testify will need to be present for sometimes a longer break than they would wish. But I think I hear you saying, so be it.
Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I would just say that I'm supportive of adding an additional meeting and potentially even another meeting, and I think that in doing so, our agendas won't be so long so that people won't have to stay as long to wait, not knowing exactly when their item will come up. So, yeah, and I think it's better for the public, it's better for the council, better all the way around.
Well, I'm with you on that. Let's take it one at a time. And we may decide to add yet another day because we're now at 3, and there is that room for additional meeting to occur if we think that it is necessary for good deliberation. So thank you for that, Sue.
So I just want to express thank you. We need to address this. It's been a problem for the public. It's been a problem for staff. It's a problem for us. And, we're not in active combat or an emergency. where we get deprived of food and rest. And I know people have other lives and other businesses, and it's problematic to try to schedule additional meetings. But we need to do that because the workload is not going away, but we need to have lunch breaks and breaks and set times that the public can depend on. So let's get on top of it. We need to change because we're getting a lot of complaints from a lot of different sectors on what our meetings have turned into.
Okay, what I'll do, and I have 2 more other items under council meetings, but this, I will draft it up based on what the discussion was today, and we'll post it for next week just to solidify and make sure that, you know, the public has the opportunity to comment and council as well. The second one, and Councilor Young made me think of this, is on Wednesday meetings. Before COVID, we would have work sessions in the morning and council time in the afternoon. Do you want to continue with how we're doing Wednesday morning now, where it's work session, council time, and then be done, or do you want to look at splitting that throughout the day?
I would prefer just get it all done.
Yeah, I agree. We tend to have less public participation during council time, and they generally not our council times that run really, really long, so.
Knock on wood. Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, every little draw on our time is cumulative from errant comments by some people that get 8 attempts at one meeting to, which took about half an hour of our time hearing about things that weren't on the agenda, to, you know, things that could be discussed with the manager one-on-one instead of at a public meeting. I mean, we really have to be mindful of everyone's time. The only concern I have, we need a lunch break. I mean, you're not as efficient, and we've had very long Wednesdays from work sessions to council time, rolling right into executive sessions, and we need a defined, even if it's just half an hour, you know, you need a mental break. I mean, it's one of the things, believe it or not, the Army taught me in some of my senior executive trainings, you need quiet time. You need to be able to think. You need a break. Otherwise, you become so much more inefficient and probably not making as good of decisions.
One of the things that, frankly, Counselor made me say this at 10 minutes is because when we were talking about a break not that long ago for a particular meeting, I had suggested that we have a 10-minute break. And you actually said, no, I support a 5-minute break. And so that's in fact what we had. So I, as a consequence, got a different message. Personally, I think that half an hour break is too long in a meeting as short as ours. But a break of 10 minutes, 15 minutes is certainly in order, if that's what council is seeking.
So I want to just be clear, since we're focused on just this topic, I don't want to miss lunch, ever, if I can avoid it. I don't want to miss lunch and dinner in a given day. It's just abusive to not only us, but the staff that have to support us. So I can't specifically recall the one time I asked for a 5-minute break, but I just want to be clear. I think we need to be more pragmatic and deliberate in how we schedule these public hearings and our work sessions.
Just Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
Just maybe a suggestion, because I do agree. You do need that mental health kind of that off switch for a little bit, but might I suggest that we look at our meeting schedule and see if we can constrict it. And then if we're still going long, then we look at adding a lunch, because I think that adding meetings will chop off a lot of the time of our meetings.
We can always look at it on a Wednesday meeting, and if we're going and it's 11 and have it, if we're still going at 11, we take a break. If that's, well, what we're doing on that day would be 11:50, so we could do that and just notice it that if needed, 11:50, there'll be a break.
I think if we went 11:50 to 12:15 as a lunch break, then I'd support that.
Well, that is a
I
nice
like that.
little mental health break, as you called it, and gives us a chance to regroup and actually gather our materials together, which sometimes is a challenge. So that could be a very good approach. How many of
Sure.
you also would support that?
Sorry, not to
Yeah.
drag this on any longer, but if we could have just some flexibility, like, I don't want to break for lunch and then come back for 15 minutes of meeting. So just if we can incorporate that flexibility somehow.
Yeah, that's always the slippery slope, and we see that in our executive sessions when, well, I think we need 5 more times, and we go through that about 5 more times, and, yeah, certainly I agree, you know, okay, we're about to conclude, let's just not break for lunch, let's just get a 5-minute break and finish up. I agree, but that's the danger we have to guard against.
Okay, I will draft that up as well for next week. And then my final item under council meetings is I am recommending the week of the 29th, which is Memorial Day, that council take off that Wednesday and not have council time. Anybody opposed to that?
I am not opposed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Work session. Oh, I'm sorry, counselor reports. Maybe to an extent, we've already had them. Are there any additional ones?
Chair, actually, my counselor report is actually to ask for a work session. I
Okay,
could go ahead. Okay, I had mentioned, some weeks ago, the Workforce Southwest Washington is collaborating with their partners in Oregon, I believe Multnomah and Clackamas County, on doing an economic report on the interstate bridge replacement. They will have some information, although it won't be complete, sometime in July, and they would like to come before us and talk to us about that economic analysis they're doing. They're looking at it from the lens of the workforce readiness, what we need to take full advantage of employing people locally. So there's that item, but then they also would like to just advise us on the investments that they're making in Clark County, because they touch on a number of our partners, including the jail, the colleges, and so they would like a little time in July to talk to us about those things. I think it would be helpful.
any idea the time frame that they're hoping for?
Sometime in July.
Maybe half an hour?
Oh, gosh, I didn't talk to them about how much time. I would say 30 to 40 minutes probably be great.
Okay, let's say 40 minutes.
Sure, I have something.
Okay, Councilor Belcott.
I just wanted to let everyone know that the EIS survey that was sent out by Oregon ODOT was completed, and they had approximately hold on, I'm having audio issues. They had approximately 7,400 survey responses. So they're going through that. They're thinking it's probably going to take a couple of weeks to get through those survey responses. And then I think a couple of you are aware that the governor in Oregon has temporarily halted the tolling discussion for a few years due to all the environmental impact concerns in the surrounding communities. So that's on a pause. And then I'm not sure, I just want to mention this during our meeting since we're all here. I'm going to be attending the legislative meeting through the chamber, Vancouver Chamber, this Friday morning. I don't know if anyone else is, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Where is that held, Michelle?
It is at the Hilton in downtown Vancouver, I believe.
Ah, very good. Well, we hope for a productive meeting and maybe one that can inform some of what we're going to hear later from CDEC too, with
Yes.
with their concerns for how the tolling will go and affect the bridge and the funding and all of that. Is there any other counselor report?
Yes, Chair, just real quickly.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Mike and Amber for taking me around our facilities here and looking at the issue that we're dealing with safety. And I don't know if all the rest of the counselors have had an opportunity. If they haven't, they really should. It was very informative to be able to do so, and I just wanted to thank them for taking the time.
Okay.
I have a
thank you.
brief counselor report.
Go ahead, counselor.
So we had a really very concise ECHO meeting where we did not get through the entirety of the agenda. We may have to schedule that more frequently because the next agenda is already pretty much oversold. Looking at the next agenda that Vanessa put out, or what she heard from the ECHO meeting. I just wanted to highlight one, we went through document recording fees once again and had the auditor present, our financial management team, Mark Gassaway, and had a really good presentation and understanding, I think, one of the four funds, how it all works. The fact that we have a community action board, which is kind of central, and that we have city councilors that are members on that board. So that took up the good portion of the discussion of where all the money is being spent, even beyond obviously document recording fees, which are fairly de minimis compared to the other $10 million that we're spending on homeless different variety of homeless plans. So the other most important portion of the discussion is eventually going to get to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff did have a participant on the ECHO team. But we had a presentation on the co-responder model, basically from VPD and CMAR. You know, basically a really great way ahead that is not just Vancouver-centric, but throughout the county and cities, where we have the appropriate response to mental health issues out in the community, not just law enforcement, but obviously law enforcement has a role in providing safety to the responders. So it was a very informative presentation, and basically they're moving forward with a pilot with our sheriff's department as well. So we look forward to hearing that and how it progresses and what may need to be expanded in the community. So I just wanted to highlight that portion of the ECHO discussion.
Thank you. That is great to hear. How about policy issues?
And none today, thank you.
Thank you. And executive sessions, we have 3 today. All 3 are for 10 minutes. 1 is for collective bargaining, and 2 are for pending litigation with RCW 42.30.110 paren 1 paren I, little I. So with that, that is a 30-minute total. Let's take it to, let's say, we could combine. I was thinking, do you want to combine this with a break or not? But probably not. Is that because otherwise we can get through with the executive sessions in due order, I would suspect. So let's plan on, unless you have a better idea, which would be fine with me, coming back again at 11,
11:40?
is it?
Yeah, we could definitely get done by lunch if we rush right down and dig into it.
I'd like 2 minutes to rush right down.
Oh, goodness sakes.
Okay, so we'll say 11:40 is when we'll come back out.
So, see you then, council, in executive session. It's 11:40. Very good. So it is 11:40 at this time, which is on Wednesday, May 10, 2023. This is the official conclusion of council time, now that we have completed 3 executive sessions at the conclusion of council time outside of that session. 1 on collective bargaining, 2 on pending legislation. So with that in mind, and there is no after action to be taken, we close down the council time and simply say best wishes to all. And we have a good handle now on going forward on so many of the comments that have come forward from council on and from the public on the various requests that came forward for proclamations. So thank you for all of that, and we wish you well, and we'll see you next time.